So, Xenoblade 3's artbook finally released, and there's a ton of new information about characters, lore and much more. Don't worry, I know most of you probably already watched Luxon's video about this artbook. I'm not going to repeat all the information that we got from there. I would rather send you over to his video if you are really interested in every new reveal from the interview section. It is linked in the description, so go watch it after this one if you haven't already. No, today I want to use this information that we got from the artbook to explain how Aionios, the avatars and the rules that A mentions in Future Redeemed work, and what this means for all the different characters inside of it. If you remember my video about 10 open questions that I really wanted answers to, you will see that most of them actually got answered, even if it's just clarification for stuff we had to assume. But the new information also changes the perspective of how Nopon and other characters work inside of this world. There is so much to discuss, so let's jump right into it. After, I remind you to please subscribe and leave a like if you really want to see more Xenoblade content. If I were to ask you before the artbook release what you think Aionios really is, there were always two camps. Is Aionios just a leftover world before it got completely annihilated? A world where Z stopped the time before everything was destroyed? Or is Aionios a parallel dimension that recreated parts of the old world in a new setting thanks to Origin? There's evidence for both scenarios being plausible. Nia mentions that Z stopped the time before everything was destroyed, and the Black Fog and Annihilation events themselves are only occurring because the two worlds are still trying to overlap each other. But the most common theory that I also subscribed to was that this was the world that Origin created because Z was controlling the very fabric of reality within Aionios. Well, now it's finally confirmed by Takahashi himself. Aionios is the Digiworld. But actually not. It's complicated. He states, regarding the world of Aionios, or rather the way Origin works, there's a proper reason for it. In actuality, there's this and that reason, and that's why this world is constructed as such. That kind of thing. Now that, I can't say it yet. Yeah, now is not the timing for that. So for now, it's fine if you think of it as basically a virtual world. That wouldn't be wrong. To put it simply, the administrator of that world could do anything, and in the main story of Xenoblade 3, that was Z. That's the story, yes. And then later he clarifies, Shulk and Rex haven't lived that long, have they? Origin is only a recreation of the worlds that used to exist, and if you think of them as being emulated, they should only be able to live what their lifespan is. We will get into Shulk and Rex's lifespans later, but for now he definitely confirms that Aionios is a recreation of the worlds and that it is comparable to a digital world. But he also clarifies that it is not literally a cyber world running on a PC. It is not the Digiworld. Rather, it is comparable to something like a parallel world, a metaphysical space recreation of the old worlds that Origin created. Thus, the entirety of Xenoblade 3 plays on an Origin server. Let's back up and explain how we got here. The interview confirms that the Black Fog and the Rifts are a sign of the two worlds trying to overlap and erase each other. What we saw happen in Future Connected with the Fog King also actually occurred in Allrest, but we never got to see that. Here's hope for Xenoblade 2 Definitive Edition with a Nier epilogue again. Anyways, after Melia, Nier and the others sat together and created Origin, the two worlds overlapped completely and annihilated each other. Now Origin kicked in and Ontos, that was at the heart of Origin's architecture, started the recreation, but then Z appeared and stopped the flow of time before the recreation process could succeed. Let's read what Takahashi says about this. Origin and Aionios. You can think of it broadly as a virtual world. Think of it like a server in a virtual world. It actually isn't the case, but it will be fine for demonstration purposes. And within that there's source code running. And as a way to express that, it can take the form of a sword, but also not. And Alvis was responsible for the general management of Origin's system. As the administrator, Alvis was quietly watching for a while after Origin started up. As this was happening, Z, a partial administrator and collective conscious-like entity, started doing things on its own. The story of Future Redeemed starts when Alvis deems this unacceptable. So basically Z, who was shaped by people's fears of moving on, was the partial administrator in that recreated world and started doing things on his own. He manipulated the saved souls of Origin and started creating the soldiers of Agnes and Kevis. His goal was to create an eternity to abide with, but he needed the life energy that the soldiers would release with their deaths. So after creating X and Y, they came together and created the 10-year lifespan, the flame clock system and the colony ranks to craft a clever war between two factions. It must have been sometime around the early days when Nia and Melia, who both have administrative rights, spawned into Aionios as well to try to stop Zed and take things back under control. We still don't know why and how being created into Aionios works when you are an admin/avatar. For example, Rex and Shulk, who both have the same admin rights as Melia and Nia, don't spawn into Aionios until many years later, and we don't exactly know why they decided to appear so late. It seems what's happening inside of Aionios is not exactly under their control completely. I want to bring up Linka's textbox on Future Redeemed here, where she explains that when Aionios was created, some people were assimilated to Origin and some weren't. They don't know the reason why, but this suggests that it was pure luck or coincidence that some people were allowed to respawn into Aionios and others were forced into that part of Origin's database that Zed used to recreate soldiers. Anyways, sadly Melia got captured, and with her admin key, Zed now had much more control over Origin's database, which allowed him to make other people into Mobius as well. Before we move on, I think this is a good point to clear out some other major things this interview brought to our attention. First of all, I mentioned Nia, Melia, Rex and Shulk have admin rights. What does this mean? Takahashi clarifies. Shulk and Rex, they defeat Alpha some years after arriving to Aionios, and they shift to sustain the world after that. But how should I say this? Their rank? Their rank is the same as Alvis and the rest of the Trinity processor. And this is also true for Nia, Melia and Fiora, who possessed Maynard's Monado. In other words, if the admin handles it, anything can be done. If the source code of that world is written as a recreation of reality, then, if for example their lifespan was set at 80 years old, when they say they can give their lifespans to Glimmer and Nicole, they can, if they rewrite the code. But you normally shouldn't do that, because you don't know what kind of glitches will occur. In response, A says, this is against the rules, and that's sort of the idea here. He confirms that in this recreated world, the Trinity processors, Nia, Melia, Rex, Shulk and Fiora all have the same admin rights and are able to recode the world if necessary. This is what A means in Future Redeemed when mentioning the avatars. The bombshell of this interview fell when Takahashi was questioned why we didn't see Fiora in Aionios. The answer is, while some people, like Shulk and Rex, appear in this world in the flesh, some people appear as objects, and that is an expression or reflection of their traits or thoughts. Things like, how can I change this world? Is this the best way to do so? Think of it as something like that. And Lucky 7, which Noah came to weird, this is actually, this is not mentioned within the story, but Fiora is inside of it. Mic drop, doesn't elaborate, and leaves the room. Takahashi is a madman. To be clear here, that important people are inside of Lucky 7 was already teased in Future Redeemed. Sadly, it is a mistranslation, and the original Japanese script could be interpreted as just one important person being inside Lucky 7. And that is none other than the person that the fanbase named 7 to hide spoilers in discussions online. I think it's kind of beautiful that it came around like this. The community actually helped name the most important sword in Xenoblade 3. The explanation as to why Fiora turned into a sword instead of appearing as a person is still super unclear. He states that it is an expression of their traits and thoughts. So maybe Fiora thought the best way to help resolve the situation inside of Aionios is not by hair in the flesh, but rather as a super powerful sword. To be clear here, once again, all of this takes place in a virtual-like parallel world, and Fiora didn't actually turn into a sword. All these people are saved and reside within Origin's database and only appear in Aionios to resolve the problems so that Origin can start functioning again and recreate the worlds as intended. Takahashi also jokingly teased that Ryan could be one of the Origin shards that we picked up for the bravery, so he definitely enjoys a little bit of trolling. Now the wild hunt actually begins. Who can find the most Xenoblade characters that turned into objects in Aionios? Me personally, I found Dromark. He gave Nia a home she can always return to, and he still protects her from everybody. Truly touching. We already know that Alvis/Ontos and then later A is considered an avatar, but he also mentions the complete Trinity processor. We do indeed see Numa's core crystal in Future Redeem, and Takahashi confirms that these are indeed Pyra and Mithra inside Matthew's gauntlet. And as we Xenoblade theorists all suspected, Logos/Malos is indeed confirmed to be inside of N's Sword of the End. What's inside the Sword of the End that N holds? That would be Logos. I mean, it's Malos, but Malos for the time being is dead or has disappeared. As to why Malos is here, I'm sorry about this, but I can't answer it at this point. But what N is holding there, that is Malos himself. That's all we get. Malos is back and he can't tell us why. If this doesn't hint at Malos being involved in a future game, then what does? But also, we didn't really get an explanation as to how he could have returned. Now is the right time to plug one of my other videos where I already made a pretty robust theory as to how he could have returned. Give it a watch after this video maybe. Other important facts. Common variety Nopon Riku over here is actually confirmed to be Riki's and not Kino's kid. More importantly, that Nopon was lying through his teeth in every single interaction. He knows about Lucky 7 and just made things up on the spot. But it's not only Riku who was lying about not knowing anything. Seemingly, every single Nopon inside of Aionios is considered an external entity to Aionios, residing outside of the flow, which means they all don't have lifespans and live forever. Yes, they all come from either Bionis or Alrest and remember everything from the past worlds. And yet, for some reason, not a single one of them brings up the truth. Could there be more behind this? In Yuni's side quest, X mentions that Nopon are not meant to interfere. Maybe there are rules in place that don't allow them to interfere in Aionios because it could cause glitches inside of Origin, and they try to best their help in any way they can otherwise. Nopon generally are the most interesting beings in the whole Xenoblade saga. In Xenoblade 1 they were neither part of Bionis or Mechonis, in Xenoblade 2 they were not part of Klaus's new cycle of life, and in Xenoblade 3 they just exist outside of Origin's rules. I don't even know how they got there and how they are gonna get back to the other worlds once this is over. They are the biggest mystery to us. So now we have the basic structure of Aionios down. Nopons just were there day one. Then Zed started messing with the world and created soldiers. Melia, Nia, Fiora and both Logos and Numa presumably spawned into Aionios as admins to stop Zed. They created the Ouroboros stones and probably tried to stop the war that Zed initiated but failed to do so. Melia was captured and Zed gained more control over Origin. During this time, Noah and Mio had also a few incarnations that fought against Zed. Some unknown time later, Rex and Shulk also decided that this can't go on like this and spawned in the flesh inside of Aionios. This is then when Future Redeem takes place. Alvis is now an unbiased processing unit without Numa and Logos being around as general admins. He deems that the best solution to resolve this current situation is to get rid of the old life and Aionios altogether and safeguard just the city people into a new world. Future Redeemed happens, Alvis gets split into Alpha and A, and then we defeat Alpha. Many things happen after that, but A ends up siding with Shulk and Co, and there was no longer a general admin. And so Zed replaced that position, and that's why Zed can mess with the source code. Alvis, he probably means A here, who was one person that was the core processor as well as the processor of the Monado, Shulk, and similarly the processor, no partner of the same processor, Rex. These three sustain the world, and the main characters outside of those are lending their strength to the characters in Aionios. Basically, with Numa, Logos and Ontos now gone as processors of Origin thanks to spawning into Aionios, Rex and Shulk had to pick up the role of the Trinity processor to keep Origin running. Zed seized that opportunity and became the main administrator. Then, during the main game, Noah comes in possession of both Lucky 7 and Matthew's gauntlet thanks to Riku, and now is wielding Fiora, Pyra and Mithra. Then he and his team defeat Zed, and Noah presumably gains admin rights to Origin. With his final wish, Origin starts the reconstruction of both worlds and then later fuse into a single combined planet, allowing Noah to meet Mio in the new world they created. Probably. Takahashi was very clear that he got many requests wanting to know what happened after the events of Xenoblade 3, but in his words, you just have to wait to find out at a later date. But there's another important topic to talk about: the city people. There was this lingering question of how they will be reborn into this new world when they originally were never recorded inside of Origin. Here is what Takahashi says to this. After that, it's time to say farewell. It's split between the Kavesi, the people of Bionis, the Agnians, the people of All Rest, and in another corner, there's the people of the city, and those three make up the structure. But I saw quite a number of comments in the survey asking what happened to the people in the city. So to answer that, and this is something that I believe you can understand from the information given in the story, but the people of the city, they are a life that doesn't exist in the original two worlds, and yet they still exist despite Origin being something like a memory machine that collected data from both worlds. This is, in fact, a suggestion that the two worlds will become one and that these people will absolutely be born in that new future. That is the structure. So yes, Gondor and Monica, they will be born in this new world. As many people already theorized, the city people will just be reborn in this new world. But as I already stated before, I don't really like this conclusion because the characters will either be born under completely different circumstances, making them way different than they were before, not to mention that it will be completely different parents because the circumstances cannot be recreated, or it suggests that they are destined to be reborn in some way or another. I don't really intend on diving into the philosophy of that now. This video is just to clarify how Aionios and Origin works in a way, so maybe this is a topic for another day. Speaking of how Origin and Aionios works, we need to talk about the inner mechanics of this place as well. Up to this point, everything was stuff that was 100% confirmed by Takahashi and the game, but we have to dive a bit into a theory crafting to explain some other components. Knowing that Aionios is like a virtual world that recreated stuff within, it finally explains how Dana Desert, that is an area from Torna that should not be around anymore, can exist again. It also explains how the irises and the blade summoning works. It's just part of Aionios' program and database. The 10-year lifespan for soldiers was something that Zed, as a partial administrator, coded to be that way. This reconfirms that Uni and Lance will age drastically different again in the old worlds because the lifespans of High Entia and Machina are super different from the rest. But talking about lifespans, Takahashi confirmed that Rex and Shulk just have their normal lifespans when they appear inside of Aionios. That is why we see them age a bit from the beginning of Future Redeemed to the end. This also means that Link and Panacea had their normal lifespans inside of Aionios and died after around 80 years. The problem arises when we talk about Nia and Melia again, because even with the fact that High Entia live way longer than normal people, their lifespan is not longer than 500 years, with Sorian already looking like an old man in his 320s. And in Aionios, we know of a 1000-year time skip already. So how is Melia alive all this time? Good question, because we have to answer this question for ourselves again. Let's read the part of the interview again. In other words, if the admin handles it, anything can be done. If the source code of the world is written as a recreation of reality, then if for example their lifespan was set at 80 years old, when they say they can give their lifespans to Glimmer and Nicole, they can, if they rewrite the code. But normally you shouldn't do that because you don't know what kind of glitches will occur. In response, A says this is against the rules, and that's sort of the idea here. Basically, if you have admin rights, you can rewrite the code in a way to keep you alive. Melia falling into a deep slumber and Nia hiding and sleeping inside of the Cloud Keep was probably the reason they survived for this long. This snippet of the interview also gives us another very interesting fact. If you do rewrite the code, it could cause glitches to occur inside of Aionios. I think, and that is just a theory at this point, that Rex, Shulk, Nia and Melia messing with the code caused glitches to occur inside of Aionios, and these glitches are the reason why Noah and Mio accidentally came back after their homecoming. And this could also be the reason why Uni and Ashira started remembering their former incarnations. You see, even after this incredible interview, there are still so many open questions that we have to theorize ourselves. But I can't deny that it cleared up more about Origin and Aionios than I ever expected. So I'm very grateful for what we got. And with this many teasers saying things like Malos and how exactly Origin works will be explained in the future, we can only look forward to Xenoblade 4 even more. Thanks for watching, and before you go, look at this cat. Subscribe, like and comment, do it for her.